Hey everyone, it's Christian, and today we'll dive into running your own self-hosted Git platform called Gitea. If you're tired of using cloud services like GitHub, for example, this is a perfect way to get back control of your code files. And actually, I think every IT and tech nerd should run something like this at home, not only developers, because a Git platform is, in my opinion, the perfect place to store and manage all of your projects. Like I'm, for example, using it for all of my Docker Compose files and configs, writing technical documentation, and so much more. It is just amazing, and what would be better than self-host something like this on your local network? Now, some of you may remember that we've already covered this topic before, like on one of my last videos on GitLab CE, which I'm still using in my Homelab today. But here's the thing, the GitLab Community Edition comes with a pretty big downside, to be honest. Because while it is a great platform, it is also a huge resource monster. On my servers, for example, it uses over 5 GB of memory, which I agree is far too heavy for many people, especially if you like to run it in smaller environments. I mean, not everybody wants to run expensive and power-hungry machines at home, and sometimes using these heavy platforms just feels overkill, right? So let me introduce you to Gitea, a powerful and lightweight Git platform that is free, open source, and easy to self-host. When I started using it, I was just blown away by its efficiency, which is a huge difference compared to GitLab. Plus, Gitea comes with all of the essential tools you need to manage repositories, add CI/CD integrations, a user management system, or issue and project tracking, but at the same time, without feeling too heavily overloaded. Gitea has just a great balance of useful features and efficiency. That's why it quickly gained a lot of popularity in the tech space as a nice alternative to GitHub or GitLab, and it even evolved to a bigger, comprehensive DevOps automation platform today. So although Gitea was originally started as a free and small open source project, today there's a much broader service offering around it. As you can see it on their website, Gitea now actually has 3 different versions. There's the Gitea Cloud version that aims to offer additional cloud services like managed CI/CD runners, automatic updates, and business support, and even an enterprise version, which you can still self-host, by the way, but this adds some paid features on top of the core functionalities, targeted mainly at enterprise customers, of course. Now, for us Homelab people, there is still the free and open source version under the MIT license around, so you can still just self-host it completely for free on your own Linux, Windows, or Mac machines. And of course, that's exactly the version that we are covering in this video. Also, we are installing Gitea using Docker, which shouldn't be a big surprise to most of you guys. It is just the easiest way to quickly get started. By the way, if you're entirely new to Docker and stuff, you probably know all of my videos and courses on my Patreon page. I've also already prepared a new boilerplate template for the Gitea Compose file on my GitHub repository, so make sure to check it out if you want to follow everything I'm doing in this tutorial. But before we start with that, I also quickly would like to discuss remote access with you. So if you would like to log into your Gitea platform from anywhere, but you are worried about opening firewall ports or routing through insecure networks, so then you should definitely check out TwinGate, the sponsor of today's video. TwinGate is a zero-trust network access platform that is honestly so much better and more secure than using traditional VPNs, because it always verifies each access request. So if the user isn't authorized, or the device isn't verified, or the context is suspicious, then TwinGate doesn't let the network request even leave the device. I've, by the way, also made tutorial videos about TwinGate in the past. It is super simple to get access to SSH servers, web interfaces, basically anything that you are running locally, and it establishes secure and blazing fast tunnels from your local machines directly to the client machine. So no matter where you're connecting from, or if there are any NAT firewalls in between, it just magically works. And the best is you can use TwinGate entirely for free, up to 5 users and 10 different remote networks. So definitely check it out. Start making your network more secure and safe. Of course, I will leave you a link to TwinGate in the description box down below. Alright guys, so here we are at my boilerplates repository on GitHub. Of course, you will find a link in the description box down below. And here I have created a new template for running Gitea in Docker Compose. So if you check out this folder here and go to the compose.yaml file, you will find a great template that you can just copy and paste on your virtual Linux server. So I'm just creating a new project directory on one of my production Linux servers that I'm just gonna call Gitea demo1 and create a new compose.yaml file and paste everything from the template in here. So of course I want to customize a couple of these settings here together with you, so make sure you always use the latest version from my boilerplate template. I'm regularly updating all of the versionings, so if you're watching the video a bit later, you might see a different version tag here. I want to customize one thing here first, the name of the container, which I usually set always to the project name, and then add the application in here. There are also a couple of settings I just copied from the official Gitea Docker Compose templates, such as the user and group ID. I think this you just need to replace with a different user and group account if you're using a different ID on your virtual server, but usually the number 1000 should be the first user you have created during the installation procedure. Also, Gitea requires a database for the backend, and you can choose between Postgres database and MySQL database. So depending on what you have deployed here, you might want to uncomment these lines and remove the Postgres type if you're using MySQL or MariaDB. But I think Postgres is my preferred choice for a database. I also added a template for running a database container in the compose file as well. So if you don't have an externally managed database and you just want to deploy a fresh new container that just automatically works, then you just need to uncomment these lines here, and this will create a new Postgres database in the version 14. So this is what I also copied from the Gitea compose file in the tutorials. And if you're using this, you also have to use a persistent volume for the database, of course, so that the data is stored even when you restart or redeploy the container in a new version. All right, so I'm also going to remove the MySQL things here because we don't need this since we have Postgres deployed. And there's also another thing that I would like to use, and this is using a traffic reverse proxy. Now, if you have followed my traffic tutorial, if not, by the way, also link in the description, this is really great to issue trusted TLS certificates for the web UI of Gitea, so that you don't get a certificate warning in the browser and all the connections are always encrypted. Now, Gitea uses two different service ports here. One for the web interface, which is running on port 3000. So if you're not using traffic, make sure to expose this port. If you're using a reverse proxy, you can just comment out this line here because you don't need to expose the web UI port. But what you definitely need to expose is the SSH port, because if you are using GitLab or GitHub, you might be familiar with cloning repositories using SSH or HTTPS, so you can use both methods. I personally always prefer using SSH for cloning the repositories because that makes sure I can authenticate to private repositories using SSH keys. This is just the best way to clone repositories, and the problem you might face is when you want to deploy Gitea on a server where you already have deployed an OpenSSH server, like it is the default on any Linux machine that you want to remotely administrate, well, then Gitea just can't listen on the port 22 because it's already used by your OpenSSH server, and therefore we want to expose the SSH port on a different number. In my case, I've chosen the port 2221, also copied from the Gitea tutorials. And what's really important here when you're using a different SSH port mapping, that you add an environment variable to tell the Gitea server in the links from the web UI that it needs to add this port here instead of the internal port 22. So I hope this isn't too much for people that are new to all of these topics. I know I like to add many things in my templates, but I think I just want to make it as complete as I can, so it is easier for people that follow each and every tutorial that I make about traffic, about Docker networks and all of this stuff. So if you're following my tutorials, you should be familiar with all of these settings here. All right, so let's comment out the network front end and back end. So the front end network, this is a Docker network that I've created where I'm connecting all of the services that I need to expose via the traffic reverse proxy. And the backend network is another separate network where I don't connect as many containers as on the front end. So here I usually just connect containers for internal database connections or things that I want to keep in a smaller isolated pool where not so many containers have access to. And I'm using the backend network on the database container as well. So make sure when you have the database container running on the backend network that you need to connect the Gitea application server to both the front-end network for the traffic reverse proxy and the back-end network so that those two containers are connected. Of course, I also need to uncomment the network setting here below. And what I also want to add is I want to uncomment this line here, depends on database. So this makes sure that the Gitea server is only started when the Postgres database server is started before. All right, so now we can configure the traffic label. So I've already deployed traffic, just I've shown you in one of the last videos before. So I'm connecting to the internal service on the port 3000. So that's where the Gitea server is still listening for the web UI connections. It's using an unencrypted HTTP protocol here. And I want to expose this using an HTTPS connection. And I want to issue a new TLS certificate using my Cloudflare certificate resolver. And for the FQDN, I'm just using a subdomain of my server production 1. So this will resolve to the internal IP address of the Linux machine where we are deploying this project here. And what is also important, when you expose this using a reverse proxy, you also have to replace the root URL. Also make sure to add an HTTPS if you're using TLS certificates, and then replace your FQDN with the IP address or the name of the server where you're deploying this. So in my case, I want to use a new subdomain that I'm just going to call gitdemo1 on my server production1.home.c creative.de domain. I think that's everything we need. Of course, we also need to create secure credentials for the Postgres database. So here you can see I'm using environment variables, and if those environments variables are not set, it will throw an exit with an error. So that's why we need to replace those environment variables here with secrets. And I've also added an example environment file on my boilerplates repository. This is a kind of a new thing that I'm adding to all of my templates from now on, because I think it is better to have some example that you can easily just copy and paste. So I'm just going to need those 3 ones. The first ones I have added with default values here. So those should just use the internal database container name for the host and the Postgres default port, so nothing too special. So let's add the .environment variable here, add those credentials, and yeah, choose any secret database password that you want. Because I'm running a production instance of Gitea already on this server. And of course, I'm using the same port number here, so I'm just going to change this to 2223. I think that should be fine. So here we are on my remote machine. I just want to open the project directory that I've created in VS Code. And here we are. Here we have my compose file and the environment variables. So I'm just going to start the project first in the foreground, because I just want to know how it's working. And if we encounter any errors in the logs, we should be notified about it. So now Postgres database is up and running, and the web interface of Gitea is also up and running. And here we are. So now Gitea will start creating the initial database configuration and will configure some settings here. Now it is important, you can change the settings later in a config file inside the container or using environment variables. But of course, it is much better to configure everything in this wizard here. So because we used environment variables for the database connection, those variables are already correct. But there are a few other customizations or general settings that you might want to change. And this is email settings. So if you want to register to your Gitea instance using emails, or you want to receive notifications for any changes, that is mostly just useful if you're using Gitea together with other people, because it will only send you notifications if your username is tagged somewhere in projects or repositories are updated by other people and so on. It won't send you a notification if you do it yourself. But if you're collaborating with others or have other user accounts, but this is optional, you can also leave it out if you don't need any email notifications here. Also here, those settings under the server and third-party services might be useful to check. So if you enable the local mode, which is the default in the latest versions of Gitea, this will disable third-party content delivery networks. Mostly useful if you're running Gitea at home. What I also want to disable is OpenID sign-in. So I think I don't need this. And I also want to disable self-registration, because I don't want anyone on my local network to try register for a new user account on my personal Gitea platform. So therefore, you might want to set your administrative username in here. Also set up an email if you're using email notifications. If not, then you can just leave it out and set your administrator password. And then just click on install Gitea. This will initialize the database seeding, so it will generate the initial setup. And that's it. As you can see, it just took 1 or 2 seconds. So it's really blazing fast. By the way, if we check the Docker container, so, okay, I might just want to restart the container in the background. Then you can also see how fast it is, because if you just start the container and refresh the page, so here we are again. So this is already functional. It doesn't need a second to restart. It's really, really efficient. Also, if you check the Docker statistics, you can see the Gitea demo server is only utilizing about 100 megabytes of memory, which is really, really nice. Let's go back to the web UI, because I want to show you a couple of things here. First of all, I want to show you some general settings that you might want to check out as well. So one thing that is pretty cool, if you go to settings here, those are your profile settings. So here you can set your account settings like email notification stuff, and you can set the dark mode or add other themes here. You can also turn off a couple of features that you don't need but might be distracting from the Gitea web UI. But I think some of those features are actually pretty useful. We want to have a look at this in a second here. Just want to show you one thing that is pretty important, the security settings. So here you can set up two-factor authentication with TOTP or security keys, so it has it built in. However, I'm using also on my production instance the Authentic provider, which is absolutely cool. So if you're not aware of this, Authentic is a free and open source IDP provider. I've also made a tutorial, a video about, and with this you can enable single sign-on using the same user account credentials, two-factor authentication or passkeys to any supported application. And Gitea is also supported, so just follow this tutorial. This is a pretty nice integration, and then you can also connect your IDP service with Gitea and use it for secure authentication to this platform as well. What you also should do is, if you're using SSH to clone repositories, you might want to manage your personal SSH keys. Just paste your public key here. So then you can authenticate not with using username and password, but with secure SSH keys to clone repositories and push changes to this platform. This is pretty nice. You definitely should set this up. If you're starting from scratch with Gitea, you might want to just create repositories, but they also have a pretty nice migration guide. So if you're already using a GitLab platform at home, but you want to migrate from GitLab, no matter if it's self-hosted or in the cloud, you can use it for both, and you want to migrate over to Gitea, or you have your Git repository stored somewhere else on the GitHub platform, or maybe anywhere, you can use the migration guide to migrate over all of the repositories and even the large file system to Gitea. This is really amazing. I'm considering doing this at some point, but not now, so maybe in the future we will see. But for now, I'm still using GitLab and Gitea in parallel to just try and test them out. Okay, so yeah, that's basically how you set up and configure all of this stuff. I think these are the most important things you should definitely take care of when you're first deploying this application. Now, I also want to show you some practical things and some features of Gitea and how it compares to any other platform. Honestly, if you're already a GitHub or GitLab power user and you know how to work with these systems, you will automatically feel very familiar in Gitea. It is not fundamentally different from any of those platforms. However, there are somewhat different in very specific or minor aspects. Just if you create a repository in GitLab, remember this was called a project. Here it is just called a repository. Honestly, I think this is much simpler than both GitLab and GitHub, because they focus on just really the most important features you want to set up. For example, give this a name. I'm just gonna use test one. You can use a template if you have created templates for automatically creating certain files or settings. You can also select issue labels. I will show you this later, so I just leave it blank for now. And you can also add gitignore templates if you are writing a Python program or so. You can also add a license here, and they have templates for most of the common licenses like MIT license and stuff. You can initialize the repository with a README file, define the default branch. So again, nothing really special, but all of the stuff that you actually need. And if you created a repository, you directly go to this page where you can see all the code files, and you can even go in here and you have a nice web editor like you know it from any other platforms. You can change things in here, preview the changes, and yeah, then commit the changes to the platform and automatically have a code history where you can see all the activities in this repository and go back in time to roll back any changes that did not work well, or yeah, start creating new branches files for developing new features, merging them into the code. So it does all of that just like you know it from any other platform. So I don't think I need to go into all of the details here. Let us try to clone this repository to my machine so we verify if the SSH is working. Now here by default it uses HTTPS using the reverse proxy or the port 3000 depending on what you have defined or what you have used in the Docker deployment. If we go to SSH, you can see because we have set the port number for SSH, it automatically appends it to all of these links here, and that is nice. So then you don't need to modify anything manually later and you don't run into any problems. So if I open a new shell and go in my project directory, just do a git clone on this test repository and pull it down, authenticate using my SSH key. And yeah, so here we are. That already works. So let's go in this directory. And here we have all of the files and the .git directory as well. So we can open it in VS Code and start writing our code, submitting our files, whatever we want. Like if we want to deploy a new Docker project to this, and we want to create a new compose.yaml file, whatever. All right, fine. So, and I now have deployed this. Maybe I want to publish this to a new branch, for example. So I can use VS Code, I can use the terminal, publish it, and then do a commit push to this platform, and whatever I do on my local machine, it's pushed using the SSH protocol to the Gitea platform. And if we go back and refresh, you can see the new branch was just pushed in here. So what is also nice, you can directly click on this to see the code changes, or what you can also do, it suggests to create a new pull request with a change list where you can see what lines or what files have been added, changed, or deleted. We can even add comments in here and add labels to this, milestones, projects, assignees, so I can assign this to myself, whatever I like. Create this pull request, and now it automatically does a code check if we can merge this code change into the main branch. And yeah, let's create this merge commit. And yeah, that's it. We can also delete the source branch if we like. So again, it's very familiar if you're using those platforms here. And you can also do any other advanced things. If you go to labels, you can use templates, for example, some easy templates or advanced labels. If you click on this and use this label set, you can change and delete any of those labels. So for example, change the color and the type and the name. And then what you can do if you create an issue, for example, just if it's just a note for yourself, nginx change port. For example, I have to change the nginx port number in the compose.yaml file, for example, and then attach a label to this if this is a bug or if this is a new feature. I think let's just add both. It's a feature and a bug, right? So then developers can fight about what it is. What is a bit unfortunate, and I like this feature on GitHub actually, is when you create issues that you can directly create a branch from that issue. That is unfortunately not possible in Gitea. So you can see it is missing a couple of these smaller things here. Most of the common general things are there, but of course there's a reason why this platform is a bit smaller than the overloaded GitLab or GitHub platform that might have this one or another feature that you miss in here. But generally speaking, you still have all of this stuff here, like pull requests. You can even run actions. If you're familiar with GitLab or GitHub actions, this is a similar thing here in Gitea as well. You can release packages and do project tracking. What is also pretty nice, if we go back to the issue, there is a built-in time tracking, so also nice. And there's even a wiki if you want to create a knowledge base or documentation for your projects. This is all very, very nice. And of course, yeah, you can star repositories like you know it from any other bigger Git platform. Honestly, the more and more I use Gitea, I start liking it more, because I always explore new features in here for a free and open source community version, which you can run in a private and efficient self-hosted environment. I think this is pretty cool. Alright, so yeah, that's it about Gitea and how you can use it to run your own Git platform at home that is free, private, and fully under your control. I hope you liked this tutorial, and if you'd like to see more like this, then please make sure to check out my Patreon page. Any support from you guys is highly appreciated, because it helps me to create more and more of these free content for all of you. So thanks everybody for watching, and I'm gonna catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.